Hey guys, welcome back. I am Ashish and today we'll be continuing with our module 2, that is administrative thought. So before moving on, a small update. PPT of this lecture will not be available to you because I am working on something different to bring out the notes to you. So give me 2 weeks for that. Let's see if it works out, and if it does not work out I will obviously make the PPTs available to you. But if it works out it would be good for me because I am doing this to save the content that I prepare with so much of time and research of my own. I want it to be used only by aspirants who are preparing for UPSC and not by anyone else for their own profit. So to save my content I am doing this. So just give me 2 weeks for that. If it does not work out I will obviously give the PPTs to you, and if it does work out I will be providing you a new way of accessing these notes. So moving on with today's session, we will be studying about dynamic administration by Mary Parker Foley. Now we have already studied about scientific management and F.W. Taylor. We have studied classical theory and all the classical theories in the classical theory. We have studied Max Weber also, and today we will be studying Mary Parker Foley. So moving on. Now under Mary Parker Foley we will be studying about 5 things in particular. The first thing would be what she said about conflicts in organization. The second thing is what she said about orders. Third is power, authority and control. Fourth is what she said about planning and coordination. And fifth thing we'll study is what she said about leadership. So getting on with it, Mary Parker Foley, she was born in 1868 and she died in 1933. Now she is a lesser known figure to the public comparatively. When you compare F.W. Taylor and Henry Fayol, she is a lesser known figure, but still she carved out a prominent place in what was largely a men's world back then. All the theorists, all the thinkers and all the authors you study about during this time period are all men, and Mary Parker Foley stands out prominently, being the only woman, being the only woman thinker. The only other thinker that we can think about is maybe Lillian Gilbreth. We have learned about Lillian Gilbreth, right, in our previous sessions. Please check out in which session we have learned about Lillian Gilbreth. To give a hint to you, there was a process known as Thablix, which was the opposite of the word Gilbreth. So Lillian Gilbreth was the other woman thinker that we have known, and Mary Parker Foley is another thinker. So she has carved out a prominent place in what was then a men's world only. She had a background in economics and political science. It goes to her credit for initiating studies on industrial groups, which had seldom been the subject matter of study by political or social scientists. She turned her attention away from the traditional subjects of study, which was the state or the community, to concentrate on the study of industry. Now this point you will understand better by next point, which is, in this context, she not only evolved principles of human association and organization specifically in terms of industry, but also convinced large number of businessmen of the practicability of these principles in dealing with current problems. So what they are trying to say here is, if you consider this time period when Mary Parker Foley lived from 1868 to 1933, not many people studied industry with a social perspective. What Mary Parker Foley did was she evolved principles of human association and organization specifically in terms of industry, and what other thinkers of this time period did was they did not consider human side of the organization. We have seen this in all of our module 2, right? We have seen this in F.W. Taylor, Henry Fayol, Max Weber, Gulick and Ervik. We have seen in every thinker and every author of this time period, none of them concentrated on human side of the organization. It was to Mary Parker Foley's credit that she evolved principles of human association and organization. So if you can see, it goes to her credit for initiating studies on industrial groups. No one as such initiated studies on industrial groups with social setting. It was she who initiated studies on industrial groups, which had seldom been the subject matter of study by political social scientists. Political social scientists largely ignored the studies of industrial groups. They were basically more focused on profit motives, on efficiency, on effectiveness. Studying the industrial groups as such, no one did that. It was to her credit that studies on industrial groups started. She turned her attention away from the traditional subjects of study, which was the state or the community. She did not focus on these things. These were the traditional subjects and she did not focus on these things. She turned her attention to something new and she concentrated on the study of industry, and she evolved principles of human association and organization specifically in terms of industry. And she not only did that, but she also convinced large number of businessmen of the practicability of these principles. She convinced these businessmen that these principles are practicable in dealing with current problems. So I hope this is clear to you. Foley's most distinctive talent was a rare ability to draw other people into cooperative dialogue and to appreciate the other person's experience almost as if it were her own. She drew upon a wide variety of experience to illuminate management concepts and principles. So she was a good talker. She used to talk to people very efficiently and very effectively, and this is what gave her experience for her management concepts and principles, because she had the ability, and this was very rare in those times, she had the rare ability to draw other people into cooperative dialogue, and she was also able to appreciate other person's experience almost as if it were her own. So she had this rare talent, she had this rare ability, and this is what gave her the experience. This is what gave her the experience to come up with management concepts and principles that she came up with. She is also considered as a bridge between classical approach and behavioral human relations approach. I have repeated this all over the module 2, that Mary Parker Foley is someone who was born in classical period, but she did not stick to classical theory. She stuck to human relations approach. She was the first person, actually, if you see in the history of the human relations approach, she was the first person to come up with such human principles. As we have seen in our previous point, she came up with principles of human association and organization in terms of industry, right? So she is considered as a bridge between classical approach and behavioral human relations approach, because she is born in an era which is known as classical era, which is known as classical theory era, right? But she did not focus on classical theory, she focused on behavioral approaches and human relations approach. So she is considered as a bridge between the classical and this approach. Daniel Wren is another thinker who says that chronologically she belonged to the scientific management era and philosophically to the social man era. We have seen this, she was born in the classical era, but she did not stick to classical theory as such. So philosophically she belonged to the social man era, and chronologically, if you see historically, she belonged to the scientific management era of F.W. Taylor. So this is Mary Parker Foley for you. Now we'll look upon some of her works. Now there are 3 of her main works, and 4th book is actually a compilation of her books. She did not write it, it is just a compilation of her books. So we'll see what these works of Mary Parker Foley was. So the first works that she gave was the Speaker of the House of Representatives in 1909. Now we'll not study what it was written inside this book, because whatever she gave in this book, she later on rejected those ideas and she moved on to new ideas. So we'll not study whatever she gave in this book because they are not important. The second book that she gave was The New State, Group Organization, the Solution of Popular Government. Now what was in this book, we'll see. Now if you ever encounter this word in exam, that the book by Mary Parker Foley, The New State, remember this word, the new state, because she gave a new governing structure. She gave a new type of state that should be there. We'll look how. Now Mary Parker Foley had an instinctive liking for community service, and she engaged herself in it. She liked community service, she liked helping people, so that is why she engaged herself in community service. That was the nature of Mary Parker Foley. In The New State, she suggested an alternative system of governance. The currently existing governing arrangement should be gradually replaced by a network of neighborhood voluntary groups. So there should be local groups which should govern the situation and not the current governance which was in practice. She gave an alternative system of governance. She thought that people who rule themselves, people who govern themselves, will be a effective governance method. So whatever the current governing arrangement was, that should be gradually replaced by a network of neighborhood or local voluntary groups. This was the alternative system of governance she gave in The New State, and that is why the book is called The New State. I hope now you will remember what is in The New State. She gave a new and alternative system of governance. Now Mary Parker Foley was firm in her belief about the efficacy of group in human action. She said that individual cannot achieve so much as groups can achieve. So groups are very efficient in human function. Groups का होना बहुत जरूरी. Individuals उतना achieve नहीं कर पाते. People in groups produce results in thoughts as well as in action, which if left to them as individuals they could not have produced. तो individual उतना achieve नहीं कर पाते जितना groups में achieve होता है. As I have already said this to you, groups produce results which if left to individuals could not have produced. Each individual influences the thinking of other thinking members, because in a group every individual can influence other people. हर कोई हर किसी को influence करता है, and the latter also influence his thought, because एक आदमी सबको influence करेगा और बाकी सब भी उसको influence करेंगे. This is a two-way process. Each individual influences others and others also influence his thought, and as a result the final product is more than the sum of what each had to offer in the beginning. तो अगर इंडिविजुअल के ऊपर छोड़ दिया जाता तो उतना हर एक का जो भी आप थॉट प्रोसेस लोगे उसका सबका सम अगर करोगे, दैट इज व्हाट द ग्रुप हैज अचीव्ड. सो फाइनल प्रोडक्ट इज मोर देन द सम ऑफ व्हाट ईच हैड टू ऑफर इन द बिगिनिंग, बिकॉज एवरीवन इन्फ्लुएंसेस एवरीवन. दिस इज व्हाई ग्रुप्स आर इंपॉर्टेंट. दिस इज व्हाट शी सेड इन द न्यू स्टेट. शी गिव टू आइडियाज. वन वाज alternate system of governance and second was efficacy of group in human function. This is her book, The New State, Group Organization, in the solution of popular government. Now we'll look upon her third book, which is Creative Experience, and this came in 1924. In this Creative Experience, Follett was now recognizing with greater clarity the critical role of a leader, that is a manager or administrator, in cultivating the kind of constructive change that could lead to popular government. तो जो भी लीडर होता है उसका रोल काफ़ी क्रिटिकल होता है. Every leader has a critical role, be it a manager or be it an administrator, whatever kind of leader you are, you have a critical role in bringing about constructive change in the society, and this is what leads to popular government. If you are a leader which brings about constructive change in the society, this is what leads to popular government. This is what Follett says. Follett says that it is a critical role of a leader to bring about constructive change. The second thing she says in her book Creative Experience is the problem of conflict in organization. Now we'll deal with what she said about conflicts in much more greater detail in upcoming slides. So two things she said in her third book of Creative Experience was critical role of leader and problems of conflict in organization. And the fourth book is Dynamic Administration, which came in 1941. This was after her death. She died in 1933, if you remember. So in 1941 a book was released, Dynamic Administration. This was the collection of her works, and this was written by Lyndall Urwick and E. Pox. This is the second edition of that book, which was written by E. Pox and Lyndall Urwick, and this book is known as Dynamic Administration, and it is the collection of all of her works. And if you will notice, our UPSC syllabus mentions this term, mentions Dynamic Administration, and in brackets the syllabus mentions Mary Parker Follett. So Dynamic Administration is actually a collection of Mary Parker Follett's work. So moving on, we'll now move on to constructive conflict. We learned in our previous slide that in her third book Creative Experience she dealt with conflicts in organization. So we'll see what she said about conflicts in organization. Now what are conflicts in organization? Conflicts are fights among employees or fights between employees and managers. If employees go on a strike, this is a conflict in organization, right? If people fight among each other, or if they revolt against the management, if they go on strike and everything, these are conflicts. So if you will notice, during her time no one else dealt with these things. If you take F.W. Taylor, if you take Henry Fayol or Gulick and Urwick, or you take any other thinker of classical thought or scientific management, no one dealt with conflicts in organization in detail. It was Mary Parker Follett who first gave the ideas of conflicts in organization. So traditionally conflict has been perceived to be wasteful and harmful. अगर झगड़े हो रहे हैं ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में, अगर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में स्ट्राइक्स हो रहे हैं बार बार, so it is wasteful, it is harmful. Traditionally this has been the perception of conflicts in organization, right? But Mary Parker Follett regards conflict as not necessarily a wasteful but a normal process. Wasteful process नहीं है वो, but normal process है. This is what Mary Parker Follett says. Conflicts are healthy. This is what Mary Parker Follett says. It is not necessarily a wasteful but a normal process by which socially valuable differences register themselves for the enrichment of all concerned. So whatever your differences are, they come out in the open. They register themselves. So आपके differences बाहर आ रहे हैं, तो normal process है, wasteful process नहीं है. Because आपके differences बाहर आ रहे हैं, उसकी वजह से what is happening is enrichment of all concerned. Whoever is concerned, the management, the employees, सबका enrichment हो रहा है because problems are getting resolved. This is what Follett believes about conflicts. It is not wasteful. It is a normal process because differences आपके बाहर आ रहे हैं. Differences are registering themselves, and these are socially valuable differences. Okay, these are not just any differences. These are socially valuable differences, and these socially valuable differences now enrich all of those that are concerned with the problem or the conflict. To Follett, conflict is neither good nor bad. अच्छा भी नहीं है, बुरा भी नहीं है. It is neither good nor bad and has to be considered without passion. उसको without passion consider करो. और ethical prejudgments, without your prejudgments, without your biases, without your passion, consider the conflicts. Do not take them as good or bad. Take them as something creative, something healthy. Take them as something that brings out the differences in the open and enriches everyone in the process. So conflicts are neither good nor bad. You should consider them without passion. Take yourself out of the equation and then consider them. Conflict is not warfare. कोई जंग या युद्ध नहीं है, कोई it is not a warfare but is only an appearance of difference. It is just an appearance of difference. तो कोई बड़ी बात बनाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है उसको. It is a normal process. It is not a warfare and it is a difference of opinions. It is difference of interest. It is just an appearance of difference. It is not warfare, and it is the appearance of difference not only between employer and employee but also between managers, between directors, or wherever the differences appear. हर जगह differences होते हैं, छोटे से छोटे लेवल से लेके बड़े से बड़े लेवल तक हर जगह डिफरेंसेस होते हैं. एंड इट इज़ कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. इट इज़ जस्ट एन अपीयरेंस ऑफ डिफरेंस. कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज़ नॉट वॉरफेयर. बिकॉज ऑफ इंडिविजुअल डिफरेंसेस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज़ अनअवॉइडेबल इन ह्यूमन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. बिकॉज इंडिविजुअल डिफरेंसेस आर देयर. हर किसी के अपना एक खुद का थॉट प्रोसेस होता है. एवरीवन हैव देयर ओन थॉट प्रोसेस एंड देयर ओन सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दीज इंडिविजुअल डिफरेंसेस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज अनअवॉइडेबल. यू कैन नॉट अवॉइड कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इन एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज अनअवॉइडेबल इन ह्यूमन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, and that is why you should accept it. it. That is why you should not ignore it. Every other classical thinker ignored human conflicts in organization. This is what Mary Parker Foley says. It is unavoidable and you should not ignore it. Since conflict is unavoidable, instead of criticizing it as something bad, one should try to capitalize on it and make use of it to do something good. उसको बार बार बुरा बोल के क्रिटिसाइज करने की जरूरत नहीं है, उसके ऊपर कैपिटलाइज करो, उसको यूज करो कुछ अच्छा करने के लिए. यूज कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स टू योर प्रॉफिट. मेक समथिंग गुड आउट ऑफ द कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स दैट आर अराइजिंग, बिकॉज कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स आर अनअवॉइडेबल. कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स होंगे ही होंगे, हर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स होते हैं. सो स्टॉप क्रिटिसाइजिंग एंड मेक पॉजिटिव यूज ऑफ इट. दिस इज व्हाट मैरी पार्कर फोले सेज. कॉन्फ्लिक्ट मे बी अ साइन ऑफ हेल्थ एंड प्रोफेसी ऑफ प्रोग्रेस, बिकॉज देर आर डिफरेंसेज. दैट इज वाई यू आर प्रोग्रेसिंग. इट इज अ साइन ऑफ हेल्थ, इट इज अ साइन ऑफ प्रोग्रेस. ड्रॉइंग एनालॉजीज फ्रॉम यूनिवर्स, ही सेज ऑल पॉलिशिंग इज डन बाय फ्रिक्शन. वी गेट म्यूजिक फ्रॉम द वायलिन बाय फ्रिक्शन. वी लेफ्ट द सुएज स्टेट व्हेन वी डिस्कवर्ड फायर थ्रू फ्रिक्शन. तो हर चीज के लिए फ्रिक्शन जरूरी है. अगर आपको आग जलानी है तो फ्रिक्शन चाहिए, अगर आपको म्यूजिक बनाना है तो फ्रिक्शन चाहिए, अगर आपको पॉलिश करना है तो भी फ्रिक्शन चाहिए. तो फ्रिक्शन जरूरी है हर चीज के लिए. एंड दिस इज व्हाई इट इज अ साइन ऑफ हेल्थ, इट इज अ साइन ऑफ प्रोग्रेस. बिकॉज देयर इज फ्रिक्शन, बिकॉज देयर इज कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इन एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, इट इज अ साइन ऑफ हेल्थ, इट इज अ साइन ऑफ प्रोग्रेस. दिस इज व्हाट मैरी पार्कर फोले सेज. Now moving on, she has dealt in length with conflict, so she also gave ways of resolving conflict. She gave 3 ways of resolving conflict, and this she gave in her third book. Now remember, I said in her first book she gave something and later she rejected. She gave 3 ways of resolving conflict in her first book also, and later on she went on a back foot and she gave new 3 ways of resolving a conflict in her third book, which was creative experience. So we'll see what 3 ways of resolving a conflict she gave: domination, compromise, and integration. These are the 3 ways of resolving a conflict that Mary Parker Foley says. So first is domination. Domination is something which is a victory of one side over the other. आप जीत गए, सामने वाला हार गया. This is domination, and conflict has resolved. Obviously, right? It is a victory of one side over the other. You have dominated over other, so the conflict has resolved, and this is the first way of resolving conflict, domination. This is the easiest way of resolving conflict. झगड़ा कर लो, जीत जाओ और conflict resolve हो गया. This is the easiest way of resolving conflict, है ना? But it is not successful in the long run. Problems with domination are discomfort caused to the dominated. आपने जिसको हराया है उसको discomfort हो रहा है, right? So this is a problem in the long run. The repressed tendencies are always there to rebel against the dominator whenever it is possible. क्योंकि सामने वाला हार चुका है, because you have won and the other person has lost the fight, there are repressed tendencies inside him. उसके अंदर वो feelings हमेशा रहेंगी कि यार वो जीत गया, मैं हार गया. So in the long run it is not healthy. In the long run those repressed feelings are always there and they can rebel again anytime. For example, in an organization, if we say, if there is a strike happening against the management and if you dominate over your employees and you end the strike somehow, those repressed tendencies inside the employees will always be there and they will always be ready to rebel against whenever they find the next possible sign to do so. So it is not successful in the long run. It is the easiest way to resolve conflicts, but it is not successful in the long run. आप लाठी चार्ज करके स्ट्राइक तो बंद कर दोगे, लेकिन वापस 2 महीने बाद फिर से स्ट्राइक होगी, उसको आप नहीं रोक पाओगे. So repressed tendencies are always there. It is not successful in the long run. Since each party retains the action tendencies that led to the confrontation in the first place, as soon as it is possible, the confrontation will take place again. This is evident from what has happened after the First World War. If you remember, after the First World War, from your world history, there was a treaty signed with various nations. It is a homework for you to learn about this treaty from your world history syllabus. Go learn about it. So if you learn about this treaty after the First World War, you will realize that many nations had some demands and those demands were not fulfilled in that treaty of First World War, and that is what finally led to the Second World War. So the best example of dominating not being useful in the long run is what happened after First World War. This is what Mary Parker Foley says. Now we'll move on to our second way of resolving conflict, that is nothing but compromise. Now compromise is something where each side gives up a little and settles the conflict so that activity which has been interrupted by conflicts may go on. So you have to lose something. Each side has to lose something. This is nothing but compromise. No one wins, no one loses. कोई जीता नहीं, कोई हारा नहीं. Everyone has compromised. They have lost something that they were demanding on, and this is how the conflict has been resolved. They gave up a little from their own side and the conflict now gets settled. Each side involved in the conflict gives up a part of its desire to settle the issue. So whatever their desires were, उसका एक छोटा सा part they gave up. They gave up a part of its desire to settle the issue. Though compromise is a widely accepted method of resolving conflicts, rarely people want to compromise as this involves giving up something. So compromise is a widely accepted method, लेकिन हर कोई compromise करना चाहता नहीं है. If it comes down to you, you do not want to compromise because it involves giving up something from your own end. If you are a third person watching two people fight, you will always say that these two people should compromise among each other. But if it comes down to you, you will will not compromise on your end. So it is a widely accepted method, but if it comes down to you, it involves giving up something, right? So people do not want to compromise. Rarely people want to compromise. So this is the second way of resolving conflict, which is nothing but compromise. And remember, in compromise also there are some repressed tendencies of WE feelings रहती हैं compromise में भी, because you have compromised, it might surface again, like domination also. It is more prominent in domination, the repressed tendencies. It is less so in compromise, but in compromise also there are repressed tendencies. So the third type that Fole says the best type of resolving a conflict is integration. Here, two desires are integrated and neither side needs to sacrifice a desire. No compromise, no win, no losing. Both of the desires are integrated. Whatever your demands are, those demands are met. Whatever the management's demands are and whatever the employees' demands are in a strike, all of those demands are met. All of those desires are integrated. This is nothing but integration. This is the best way of resolving a conflict according to Mary Parker Fole. Neither side needs to sacrifice its desires. Fole feels that integration has some advantages when compared to compromise. Why? Compromise does not create but only deals with the existing, whereas integration creates something new, leads to invention and the emergence of new values, because now you are combining the two desires, you are creating something new. What compromise does is it does not create something new, it deals with the existing. You have to give up something of your own, so it deals with the existing. What integration does is it creates something new, it leads to invention. This is why it has an advantage over compromise. It leads to the use of better techniques and also saves time and resources. You do not waste your time in contemplating what you have to give up as a compromise. Because you are integrating, you also save time and resources, and it is a better use of technique. Integration goes to the root of the problem and puts an end to the conflict permanently. Using compromise, the conflict may come up again in some form, as people are not always happy with the fulfillment of only a part of their desire but want to fulfill the whole desire, because compromise asks you to give up something of your desire, right? So people are not happy with fulfillment only a part of their desire, so conflict may come up again. Repressed tendencies are there in compromise also, so using compromise is not as efficient as using integration, because integration goes to the root of the problem and puts an end to the conflict permanently. She illustrates this point from the industrial and international controversies where this often occurs, but integration stabilizes and conflicts are settled permanently. So whatever international controversies you see which have been resolved by compromise, the best example that I can give you is India-Pakistan conflict that has been resolved by compromise. Each party had to give up some of its desire, but you just need a small event again to come up with that conflict again. Those conflicts which are resolved on compromise do not get settled actually, and best examples are international controversies. This is what Fole says. So all the conflicts should be resolved by integration, especially international controversies, because international controversies leads to war, right? So to avoid wars, we should use integration. We should combine both of the desires of both the sides in international controversies. Fole is aware of the difficulties involving in achieving it. She says that integration is the best way of resolving a conflict, but she is aware of the difficulties involving in achieving it. She does not think that it is always possible to achieve integration. For example, when two men want to marry the same woman, this is a conflict which cannot be resolved by integration, right? She is aware. Fole says that I am aware of the difficulties involved in achieving it. Not every conflict can be resolved by integration, of course, obviously. Some conflicts need domination, some conflicts need compromise, but as far as possible, you should try to look out for integration. This is the best way of resolving conflict. Fole says that it is often difficult to say whether a decision reflects true integration or something of a compromise. तो मुश्किल होता है ये बताना कि आप अगर किसी रिजोल्यूशन पे पहुंचे हो, वो रिजोल्यूशन इंटीग्रेशन है या कॉम्प्रोमाइज है. इज इट अ ट्रू इंटीग्रेशन और इज इट अ समथिंग ऑफ अ कॉम्प्रोमाइज? इट इज often difficult to say whether a resolution is a compromise or integration. This is what Fole says. However, she asserts that the desire of the people to solve their problems through integration in itself is encouraging. क्योंकि आप इंटीग्रेशन से सॉल्व करना चाहते हो, यही बहुत बड़ी बात है. फिर वो चाहे थोड़ा सा कॉम्प्रोमाइज ही क्यों ना हो, क्योंकि आपने सोचा भी कि आप इंटीग्रेशन कर रहे हो. दिस इज अ बिग थिंग इन itself that you want to resolve conflicts by integration. If we are conscious of its advantages, we can try integration instead of compromise or domination. So you should always go for integration for resolving a conflict. This is what Mary Parker Fole says. These are the three ways of resolving a conflict: domination, compromise and integration. So now we'll see some of the bases of achieving integration. Mary Parker Fole gives us some of the steps of how to achieve integration. We'll see them now. The first step she says is bring the differences into the open instead of suppressing them. जो भी आपके feelings हैं बाहर लेके आओ. Bring your differences out into the open. This is the first step of achieving integration. If you do not bring your desires, if you do not bring your differences into the open, how will you integrate them? The other person who is fighting with you will not understand what your desires are, what your differences are, if you do not bring them into the open, right? So first step is bring your differences out into the open. Do not suppress them. We cannot hope to integrate our differences unless we know what they are, right? So bring them out into the open. Therefore, what is needed is to uncover, identify and understand the real issues involved in a conflict. This involves finding out the significant rather than the dramatic features involved in a conflict or controversy. So सारा ड्रामा बाकी बाहर छोड़ दो, whatever your dramatic features are, leave them aside, bring out the significant and real issues. You should uncover the real issues, you should identify and understand the real issues involved. This is the first step of achieving integration. Bring out your differences in the open and find out the significant rather than the dramatic, find out the significant features of your differences. This is necessary because there is a tendency among managers to deal with the dramatic moments, forgetting that they are not always the significant moments. Identification of the most significant moments lead to uncovering of the real conflict. So in an organization, if there is a conflict between managers and employees, managers always tend to focus more on the dramatic moments कि मेरी बात नहीं सुन रहे, मेरे ऑर्डर नहीं मान रहे, ऐसा थोड़ी चलता है, मैं तो मैनेजर हूँ, तुमको मेरी बात माननी चाहिए. So ये ड्रामा सब बाहर छोड़ दो. You should try to understand why they are not obeying your orders as subordinates or your employees, why there is a conflict against you being a manager. So as a manager, you should try to deal with significant moments, and this is why it is important. You should leave aside dramatic moments. As you can see, identification of the most significant moments lead to the uncovering of the real conflict and not the dramatic features of the conflict. So second step that Foley says is breaking up of the whole, that is to consider the demands of both sides involved in the conflict and to break them into their constituent parts. Now the first step has been achieved. Now that you have brought out your differences in the open, now that you have said what is affecting you, second step is to break up the whole, to consider the small parts of the problem. जो भी problem है उसको छोटे छोटे parts में divide कर दो and try to solve those small parts. Try to break your problem into constituent parts, and this is the second step, breaking up the whole problem into constituent parts. But breaking of a problem into its constituent parts involves the examination of symbols, which in turn involves a careful scrutinizing of the language used to see what it really means. Now the symbols here mean both physical symbols and the symbols used in a language. As a manager, it is your duty to carefully examine these symbols and to read these symbols. For example, your employee might not be happy with you, but he might pretend to be happy. So it is your job to read that symbol, to examine that symbol, and not just physical symbol, also on the language used. If someone is giving their problem to you in writing, and if they are not able to completely explain their differences to you, it is your responsibility to scrutinize the language used, those symbols used, so that you understand the real issue behind the problem. So as a manager, it is your duty to examine these symbols, all of those symbols. It is your duty to examine these symbols, which in turn involves a careful scrutinizing of the language used to see what it really means, what the real issue behind the problem is. It is your duty to identify these real issues. To Foley, all language used is symbolic, and therefore one should be on one's guard to know as to what is being symbolized. Because let's say, for example, if you ask me to come out with my differences and my problems, I might not be that able or that capable to express my problems, and it might be because the kind of person I am, or might be because I am not trained to do so. So as a manager, your duty is to be on your guard to know what is being symbolized, to scrutinize the language used, to examine the symbols used, because all language is symbolic. What I may not be able to convey to you, you must be able to understand. This is what as a manager your work is. Integration not only involves breaking up of the whole, but sometimes one has to do the opposite. Sometimes what happens is, I might give you my problems in pieces. एक दिन बोलूँगा ये मुझे अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है, दूसरे दिन बोलूँगा मुझे ये अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है, तीसरे दिन कुछ और बोलूँगा. So as a manager, not only your job is to break up the whole, your job sometimes also involves putting up the pieces together and creating a whole. So this is the second step. The first step is bringing out the differences into the open. The second step is breaking up of the whole, understanding the languages used, understanding the symbols used. So this is the second step of achieving integration. The third step that Foley says is anticipation of conflict. Anticipation means expecting something to happen, being prepared for it, trying to guess something well ahead of its time in advance. So this is anticipation. You should always expect something, you should always be on your guard, and you should always try to see what conflicts may arise in future. So you should always anticipate conflicts. Anticipation of conflicts is the third step. Anticipation of conflict does not mean avoidance of conflict. This does not mean that you avoid conflict, because avoiding conflict is a bad way, right? Conflicts are good, conflicts are healthy. We have seen this in our previous slide also. Friction is necessary in life. Friction is very much necessary in life. So conflicts are healthy, conflicts are a sign of progress. So anticipation does not mean you should avoid conflicts in future. It only means responding to it differently, responding to it in a better way, being prepared for it. This is what anticipation means. To illustrate this, Foley gives the example of a man who liked motoring while his wife liked started walking. He anticipated what her response might be to a suggestion that they motor on Sunday afternoon by tiring her out playing tennis in the morning. Now she gives an example that there is a man who likes to drive and there is a woman, his wife, who likes to walk. So what that man did was he anticipated her response. When he would ask her to drive, he anticipated her response that she would ask to walk, right? So he anticipated that. He did not avoid that, but he dealt in it in a different way. What he did was he played tennis with her in the morning of one Sunday, and in the afternoon he asked her to drive. So when she was tired by playing tennis in the morning, she obviously would not say that leave the drive, we should walk, right? So he did not avoid the conflict, he just anticipated it and he dealt with it in a different way. So this is anticipation as given by Mary Parker Follett. To Follett, integration is like a game of chess. In chess also you anticipate what the other player might make the next move, right? So integration is like a game of chess. Anticipation of response by itself is not enough. There is need for preparation for response as well. You should prepare well enough in advance. This involves building upon certain attitudes in people. So you should build up certain attitudes. This is how you prepare. Building up of attitudes we will learn about in our future slides in more detail, so do not worry about this. Response is of two types, Follett says. One is circular and one is linear. Circular response is मैंने कुछ बोला फिर आपने कुछ बोला फिर मैंने कुछ बोला, I have said something then you have said something. This is circular response. A good example of circular response is game of tennis. I'll serve, you will hit, I'll hit, you will hit, I'll hit. So this is circular response. When I have said something, you have said something. So there are two types of responses according to Follett. One is circular response and another one is linear response. According to Follett, circular behavior as the basis of integration is the key to constructive conflict. So if you have to make the conflict constructive, there should be circular behavior as the basis of integration and not just linear. It should not be just one-sided, it should be both-sided. You should listen to other person also. This is what the key to achieving integration is according to Mary Parker Follett, circular behavior. So these are the three steps or the three bases of achieving integration as given by Follett. So moving on, obstacles to integration. Now she gives us some obstacles which are in the way of achieving integration. The first obstacle is intelligence and inventiveness. Integration requires high intelligence, keen perception and discrimination and a brilliant inventiveness. तो अगर आप intelligent नहीं हो, you will not be able to achieve integration. You should be smart enough, you should be capable enough to see that it is not good to fight, it is not good to dominate, it is good to integrate. So this is the first obstacle in achieving integration, the intelligence of person involved in conflict. Because integration requires high intelligence, keen perception and discrimination and brilliant inventiveness. You should be a creative person to achieve integration. You should be able to invent something new. This is the obstacle in achieving integration, intelligence and inventiveness. It is always easier to fight than to suggest better ways of doing a job. This is why it is an obstacle. People always resort to fight. झगड़ना लड़ना हमेशा easy होता है, right? So it is always easier to fight and they always resort to fight. As we have already seen, domination is the easiest way of resolving a conflict, right? But it is not good enough in a long run. So this is the first obstacle. Your intelligence and your smartness come in the way of achieving integration. As long as intelligence and inventiveness are not there, resolving conflicts through integration would be difficult. अगर ये दोनों चीज नहीं है तो resolving conflicts would be very difficult. The second obstacle is habit of enjoying domination. The best example that I can give you here is of some local mafia don, some gangster who has a habit of enjoying domination. If you tell this to a gangster that भाई झगड़ा मत करो, integrate कर लो अपने differences, he will just shoot you in your chest, in your head, right? So if you have a habit of enjoying domination, this is an obstacle in achieving integration. To many, integration is a team affair. Because I am strong, I'll fight and I'll win. Integration is for soft and weak people. Integration is a weak affair. This is what many people think, and this is a habit of enjoying domination which is an obstacle in achieving integration that Mary Parker Follett says. To many, integration is a team affair. It does not give them the thrill of conquest. वो thrill नहीं आती, वो मजा नहीं आता, right? Integration में. So it does not give them the thrill of conquest nor the satisfaction of victory. Often the problems are theorized instead of taking them as proposed activities or practical issues needing immediate solution. Quite often people forgetting that disagreements will disappear if they stop theorizing, go on theorizing the problem on hand. तो किसी किसी की आदत होती है कि कोई प्रॉब्लम आ गई तो उसको थियराइज करो, अरे ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है, वैसा क्यों हो रहा है. कभी कभी what is needed out of you is just take whatever the problem is arising, take them as proposed activities which you should do. If your employee is unhappy about something, it might be just because you are not doing something. So it might just be some proposed proposed activity for you, and if you just do that proposed activity, if you just deal with that practical issue for once, that problem might be over. But instead of doing that one particular thing, one simple thing that the problem is bringing upon, what some people do is they go on theorizing. अरे मैरी पार्कर फुले ने बोला है भाई इंटीग्रेशन के लिए ये करना जरूरी है, लैंग्वेज को पढ़ो, सिंबल्स को पढ़ो, ये करो वो करो, प्रॉब्लम को थियराइज करेंगे. सो समटाइम्स ऑफन प्रॉब्लम व्हाट पीपल डू इज कुछ ज्यादा ही इंटेलिजेंट हो जाते हैं. टू मच ऑफ इंटेलिजेंस ऑल्सो कम्स इन द वे, राइट? सो दे गो ऑन थियराइजिंग द प्रॉब्लम्स instead of taking them as some proposed activities. This is the third obstacle of integration. The fourth obstacle is the language used. Language used must be favorable for reconciliation and should not arouse antagonism and perpetuate the conflict. Sometimes language used even creates new disputes which were not there earlier. If you are not happy with someone, if you have some problem with someone, now let's say you are bringing out your differences in open in front of that person and you go on abusing the other person. यार तूने ऐसा क्यों किया, वैसा क्यों किया, beep beep beep. You go on abusing that person. So language used is also an hurdle, is also an obstacle to achieve integration. Sometimes what language you used might create new disputes which were not there earlier. So this is the fourth obstacle that Mary Parker Follett says you should be careful about the language that you are using while you are bringing your differences out in the open. Your language used must be favorable for reconciliation. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि फिर solution के लिए कुछ बचा ही नहीं, फिर झगड़ा ही करना पड़ेगा. So your language used must be favorable for reconciliation. The fifth is undue influence exerted by the leaders. Some people think that I am the leader, I am the manager, what I say should happen and you should not have say in anything. So this is an undue influence which a leader exerts. So this is the fifth obstacle, thinking too much of yourself, thinking that you are a leader so you are God. So this is an undue influence exerted by leaders is the obstacle of achieving integration. The next obstacle is lack of training. If you are not trained properly, obviously you will not be able to achieve integration, right? For integration you need to be trained how to achieve integration. You need to know all the steps of achieving integration, the steps of bringing out your differences in open, breaking the problem into small parts and anticipating these steps of integration. You need to be trained in that. So lack of training is also an obstacle to integration. Follett says that in most cases there is a tendency to push through or to force through the plans previously arrived at based on preconceived notions. Because you have some preconceived notions and you are not trained, you tend to push through the plans. नहीं नहीं करो ऐसे करो, मैं बोल रहा हूँ ना मैं लीडर हूँ, ऐसे ही करो, ऐसे ही करना चाहिए. You try to force your way through the plans. Because you are not trained in achieving integration, this happens. Because of your preconceived notions, this happened. This is because of lack of training. Therefore she pleads that there should be courses to teach the art of cooperative thinking. There should be courses that teach you how to integrate, that teach you how to think cooperatively, to master the technique of integration, both for the workers and managers. सबके लिए, for everyone there should be a course on the art of cooperative thinking, because the lack of training is an obstacle in achieving integration. So these are the obstacles that Mary Parker Follett says come in way of achieving integration. Moving on to orders, what she said about orders we'll see now. Now giving orders, according to Mary Parker Follett, there are 4 important steps in giving orders, or 4 important attitudes that a person should have while they give orders. The first attitude is a conscious attitude. Every person should have a conscious attitude if you have to give order. What is this is? It means realizing or recognizing the principles through which it is possible to act on in any matter. Most people, without even knowing the different principles that underlie the giving orders, give orders every day. So the task of giving orders has some underlying principles beneath it. These might be positive principles, these might be negative principles. Let's say for positive principles, for example, you should be respectful of others, you should listen to what other people have to say about your orders. So these are positive principles. Treat everyone as equal. Some negative principles of orders are like you should be bossy to your employees, your subordinates. So there are various principles underlying the function of giving orders. So every person who is giving orders should know these principles. You should be conscious about these principles. You should realize and recognize these principles. Follett says that most people, without even knowing the different principles that underlie giving orders, give orders every day. So this is not a proper way of giving order. The first step or the first attitude that a person should have is a conscious attitude. You should be conscious, or you should be aware of the principles that underlie the function of giving orders. The second attitude is a responsible attitude. This means after recognizing different principles, in conscious attitude you have recognized different principles, right? So after recognizing different principles, one must decide which principles he should act on, and then he should give orders in according to those principles. So for example, if let's say a situation asks you to be bossy sometimes, you should recognize those principles, and in a responsible attitude you should be able to execute those particular principles according to the needs of the situation. So the second attitude is of a responsible attitude, that after recognizing different principles you must be able to decide which principles you are following today to act on giving orders. So this is a second attitude, that is a responsible attitude, a conscious attitude, a responsible attitude. And the third is an experimental attitude. You should experiment with things, you should experiment different orders giving in different ways. So you are actually experimenting things, and you should see your employees or subordinates are responding better to which of your methods. So you should have an experimental attitude. You should not stick around to being bossy all the time, that is wrong. Or you should not stick around to being soft all the time, that is also wrong. You should have an experimental attitude. Try experiments and watch results. Note whether the experiments are successful or a failure, and analyze the reasons for same. So you should have an experimental attitude, and you should analyze the reasons for your experiments failing or succeeding. The next attitude or the next important step is pooling the results. You should have an attitude of pooling the results of the experiments. In the third step that you performed, all the results should be pooled. One should pool the experiences of all and see to what extent and in what manner the methods of giving orders can be changed if the existing methods are found inadequate. So if your methods of giving orders are failing, if that particular experiment failed, you should be capable enough to see why it failed, and you should be able enough to change your methods of giving orders. These are the 4 important steps of giving orders that Mary Parker Foley says: a conscious attitude, a responsible attitude, an experimental attitude, and pooling the results of those experiments. This is how you give orders. Moving on. There are difficulties in giving orders. What these difficulties are: past life, training, experience, emotions, beliefs, and prejudices from certain habits of mind. So if you remember, in our previous session of Max Weber, we have learned something about trained incapacity. When we were criticizing Max Weber, one of the critics, Robert Merton, said that bureaucracy leads to trained incapacity. What trained incapacity is: even if you are trained, your past experiences and your past education and knowledge comes in way of you achieving your target, right? So that is trained incapacity. So this is also a difficulty in giving order, as Mary Parker Foley says. Your past life and your past training also can come in way of giving orders, because you form an habit pattern. There is something habit that you form. If you tend to give orders in a particular way, you tend to give orders only in that way your whole life. So that is a habit pattern that you are forming. An action pattern is formed, an habit pattern is formed, there is a motor set that is formed. So these are the difficulties in giving orders. Your past life, your training, your experience form a habit pattern. You need to change these habit patterns. Unless these habit patterns and certain mental attitudes are changed, one cannot really change people. So you need to change your habit patterns, you need to change your mental attitudes with evolving times, because times keep on changing. You need to change your habit also. This is the first difficulty in giving orders. Next thing she says is, she gives an example of the farmer that has a general disposition to manage the lands alone, and this is being changed by the cooperatives. So what is cooperative farming? Cooperative farming is farming jointly, farming together. Every person is still the owner of their land individually, but they come together and they farm together. They pool their land together and they farm jointly, and whatever the produce happens in that joint farming, that produce is then divided according to the ratio of the land that was pooled in by the individual farmers. So this is cooperative farming. So the example that Foley gives is, she says that a farmer has a general disposition to manage the lands alone. हर farmer का ये खुद का एक इच्छा होती है, खुद की विश होती है कि मैं अपनी खेती खुद करूँगा. But cooperative farming is trying to change that thought, right? So farmer has a general disposition to manage the lands alone, and this is being changed by the cooperatives. To bring about such a change, Foley suggests 3 things. Building up of certain attitudes is the first thing. You should build up certain attitudes in the farmer. आपको उसका thought process ही change करना पड़ेगा ना, because he has a general disposition to manage the lands alone. You have to change that attitude first. So the first thing is building up of certain attitudes. The second thing is providing for the release. Now that you have built up that certain attitude, provide some way to release that attitude. One way of building attitude is giving them the advantages of cooperative farming or joint farming. If you give them the advantages of cooperative farming, they will change their attitude. Now that you have changed their attitude by giving them the advantages, give them a way to do cooperative farming. bring in 3 to 4 farmers more and tell him that you can do cooperative farming with these people. So you are providing a way to release their attitude. So first he is building that attitude, and second is providing a way to release that attitude, and the third thing that you should do is augmenting the released response as it is being carried out. Augmenting means making it more better, making it more effective, making it more great. So whatever the response has been released, you augment it as and when it is being carried out. Now for this also, Foley gives us an example. For these three things, she gives us an example of a salesman creates in us an attitude that we want his article. So a salesman will come at your door, he will try to sell something you. So what he is doing is he is building up an attitude in you to buy that article. He creates in us an attitude that we want his article. He will tell you all the advantages of that particular product he is selling. Then at just the psychological moment, he produces his contract form which we may sign and release the attitude. And then when he feels that we are in favor of his product at that right moment, just the psychological moment, जब उसको लगता है कि हाँ अब ये मेरी बात मान रहे हैं, at that just the right moment he will produce his form and he will ask you to sign it, and that is a way of releasing your attitude. So the first thing that he has done is create an attitude in you, and the second thing he has done is he has given you a way to release your attitude. He has produced his contract form. And then the third thing, then if we are preparing to sign, someone comes in and tells us how pleased he is with this purchase of this article, that augments the response which is being released. तो आप जैसे जैसे वो फॉर्म साइन करने लग गए अभी, तो क्या होगा, a third person will come from somewhere else and he will say that, oh, you are buying this, I have also bought this is such a nice product, I am happy with this product. So this is like augmenting your response so that you do not have any doubts now. So I hope you understood this, the three things to bring about a change. If you have to give order to bring about a change, you have to do three things. First is build up attitudes in the person, second is provide a way for the release of these attitudes, and the third is augment those released responses. Foley says that before giving orders, the employee should also consider the ways and means of forming the habits, forming the attitudes. So if you are giving order, the first thing that you should do is change the habit, because habits come in way of implementing orders, right? So you should change the habits and you should change the attitudes. As a manager, as an employer, as an administrator, it is your duty to change the habit among the employees to ensure acceptance of the orders. And this is true for Indian administration also. If you are an administration as an IAS officer or as an IPS officer, it is your duty to change the attitude of people you are serving so that they accept the change you are trying to bring in. So you should build up that attitude first. पहले आप उनको advantages बताओ. For example, if in some remote village area you are trying to bring in technology and computer and all such digital cashless transactions and all such stuff, people might not accept that change readily. So what you have to do is, as an administrator, it is your duty to build up that attitude. So first you build up those attitudes in the people that you are serving. You create those habits in them to use those digital transactions, to use those cashless transactions. Only then it is possible, right? And then you provide a way to release those responses. So this is a way of giving orders. This is what Foley believes, that giving orders is changing the habits or changing the attitudes of people you are giving orders to. So moving on with our giving orders part, environment of giving orders is also important. This is what Foley believes. Foley says that the response to the orders depend upon the place and the circumstances under which the orders are given. For example, if let's say you are not paying your employees and your employee is not happy with you, and if in such situation you are giving order to your employees, there is a 99% chance that your orders will not be executed. On the other hand, let's say if there is an environment of happiness all around in the organization, if your employees are happy with you, if you are paying them fine, if you are promoting them fine, you are taking care of their needs and everything, and if you are giving them orders now, there is a 99% chance that your orders will be executed to the fullest extent. So environment of giving orders is also important. This is what Foley says. She believes that response to the orders depends upon the place and the circumstances under which the orders are given. The other thing she says is favorable response to an order is inversely proportional to the distance the order travels. Face-to-face suggestion is more efficient. So let's say, for example, let's consider a scenario where you as a manager are giving orders to your employees. In a first scenario, you are giving orders via email to all your employees, and in a second scenario you are giving orders them personally, face to face. Which do you think is more efficient way of ensuring that your orders are being executed? Obviously face to face suggestion, right? Because it brings in a more personal touch to the orders, right? Face to face suggestion is more efficient. This is what also Foley says, that whatever the distance is of giving orders, that distance is inversely proportional to the favorable response. That response is less favorable or more favorable in your side depends on how distant you are while giving orders. So I hope this is clear to you. Favorable response to an order is inversely proportional to the distance the order travels. The next thing is integration within. To follow both giving and receiving orders is a matter of integration through circular behavior. Now while studying integration as the third step of resolving conflict, we have seen that there are two types of responses, right? Circular and linear, and Foley says that circular behavior is the key to integration, but that was, we were learning about external integration. That was the way of resolving conflicts. So that was external integration between the desires of employees and management, let's say for example. So that is a kind of external integration. What Foley says is internal integration is also important, वो भी बहुत ज़रूरी है. Integration within is also very important. And how? There are two dissociated paths in the individual. Therefore, before integration can be made between order giver and order receiver, there is a need for integration to be made within the individual. An order should seek to unite, to integrate the dissociated paths. So every individual has two ways. Either I'll follow that order, or either I'll not follow that order. Either I'll do this or either I'll do that. So every individual, हर इंसान के अंदर दो dissociated paths होते हैं, या तो मैं ये करूँगा या तो मैं वो करूँगा. So before giving order, it is your duty to integrate those dissociated paths within an individual. So integration within is also required, so that your orders are executed or implemented to the fullest extent, because there is no two way now. There is only one way. You have integrated within the employee, within the subordinates, those two dissociated paths. So you should seek to unite or integrate those dissociated paths. This is what an order should do. So integration within is also very important. So remember these things, these are very important. The next thing he says is the manner of giving orders. Harassing, tyrannical and overbearing conduct of officials is an important reason for many industrial controversies. So whatever industrial controversies you see, whatever strikes you see happening, whatever fights within an organization happen, those mostly to the 99% of extent they happen because of harassing nature of management, because of tyrannical nature of management and overbearing conduct of officials. So this is a wrong manner of giving orders. This is what Foley believes. Manner of giving orders is also important, right? This is not the way of giving orders. Treating men without regard to their feelings and self-respect would result in strikes and strained industrial relations. So if you do not give importance to their feelings, if you disregard their self-respect, they will obviously strike against you. Treating men without self-respect and treating them below you is not the way of giving orders. This is the bad manner or the wrong way of giving orders. This is what Foley believes. The language used often arouses wrong behavioral patterns. The more one is bossed, the more one develops the opposition to bossing. आप जितना सामने वाले को दबाओगे उतना ही वो आपको उल्टा रजिस्ट करेगा, उतना ही वो आपके आगे स्ट्राइक करेगा फ्यूचर में जाके. सो द मोर यू आर बॉसिंग समवन, द मोर ही विल डेवलप अपोजिशन फॉर यू. दैट इज द रॉन्ग वे ऑफ गिविंग ऑर्डर्स. यू शुड नॉट गिव ऑर्डर्स बाय बॉसिंग समवन. यू शुड ट्रीट एवरीवन इक्वली. दिस इज द वे ऑफ गिविंग ऑर्डर. दिस इज द मैनर ऑफ गिविंग ऑर्डर दैट Foley believes. So moving on, we will now see what depersonalizing order means. So depersonalizing order means to avoid too much of bossism in giving orders or giving no orders at all. Basically depersonalizing means removing you out of the situation. When you are giving orders, you should not put yourself into the equation and give orders. Remove all your personal emotions and all your personal biases. Remove yourself from the equation itself and then you give orders. Not as someone by your name, but someone by your position you should give orders. That is nothing but depersonalizing orders. So first way of depersonalizing orders is to avoid too much of bossism or giving no orders at all. या तो आप कुछ भी ऑर्डर नहीं दे रहे, या तो आप बहुत ही bossism करे जा रहे हो. So you should avoid being too much of bossy, or you should also avoid giving no orders at all. This is nothing but depersonalizing orders. You should remove yourself from the equation of giving orders. And she also gives us a law of the situation. Mary Parker Foley gives us the law of the situation. It is nothing but study the problem to discover the law of the situation and all should obey it. One should not give orders to another, but both should agree to take orders from the situation. For example, let's say you are a manager and you have a subordinate. You should not ask that subordinate to do overtime just because you are the manager and just because you want to give orders. So you should not give orders just because you like it. You should give orders because there is a situation. You should study the situation, you should study the problem and follow the law of the situation. If the situation demands it, only then you should give order. This is the law of the situation. So one should not give orders to another, but both should agree to take orders from the situation. The one who is giving order and one who is taking order, both should agree to take orders from the situation. This is the law of the situation. If orders are a part of the situation, the question of someone giving and someone someone receiving orders does not arise and both take the orders from the situation, फिर वो बात ही नहीं उठती कि तुम मुझ पे बॉस कर रहा है, कि तुम मुझ पे बहुत रोब झाड़ रहा है, because both realize that it is the need of the situation. The question of someone giving and someone receiving orders does not arise. Fole here gives the example of two heads of department who do not give orders to each other. So let's say there are two departments in government of India, Department of Revenue and Department of Investment. So these two heads of departments are heads in their own right, and they do not give orders to each other because there are two heads of two different departments, right? So they do not give orders to each other. They follow the law of the situation. This is what the job of two heads of department is, and this is what should happen in real life organizations also. This is what Fole believes. All the managers should also follow the same example of two heads of departments, and they should also follow the law of the situation. So I hope law of the situation is clear to you. No one should give orders and no one should take orders. They should all follow the law of the situation. Depersonalizing orders, however, does not mean that one should not exercising authority. Just because you are saying that you should not give orders and take orders does not mean you are not exercising your authority. As a manager, it is your right to exercise authority. So you are still exercising authority, but you are taking yourself out of the equation. You are depersonalizing your order. So it is not like you are not exercising authority. You are still exercising authority. You are just depersonalizing your order. So remember that it only means exercise of authority of the situation. You are following the law of the situation. She gives the example of a boy here who says no and then gets a pail of water for his mother. तो उसकी माँ ने उसको बोला एक बाल्टी पानी ले आ, बच्चे ने बोला कि नहीं मैं नहीं लेके आऊंगा. In this case he resents the command but recognizes the demands of the situation. So initially he says that no, I'll not get the pail of water, but then he gets the pail of water for his mother. So what he is doing is he is resenting the command, but he realizes that the situation is so. He is realizing the law of the situation. I hope you realize this. He is realizing the law of the situation, that the situation demands for him to get the pail of water. So how much ever he resents the command, he will still get the pail of water for his mother because his mother asks him in that situation. So depersonalizing order does not mean that you are not exercising authority. The mother is still exercising authority and the boy is still following the authority, and both of them are depersonalizing order and they are following the law of the situation. I hope this is clear to you. So moving on. Also, the situation is never static. It always develops and always evolves. Therefore, the order too should never be static and must always be integral to the situation. Because you are following the law of the situation and situation is dynamic, your order should also be integral to the situation. It should be dynamic. You should not form a particular habit. We have seen this in previous slide also, that you should avoid forming some habits of giving orders. Your orders should be integral to the situation that you are giving orders in. Because situations are dynamic, your order should also be dynamic and integral to the situation. Another affecting factor is people resent a feeling of being under someone or subordinate to somebody. People would like to work with someone because with proposition heightens self-respect and increases efficiency. Again the same thing, जितना दबा के रखोगे उतना opposition मिलेगा, right? So people resent a feeling of being under someone. They do not want to be subordinate. They wanted to be treated equal, right? So people would like to work with someone. So if you are a manager, if you have subordinates within you, if you are an administrator, for let's say example, if you are an IAS officer and you have a people to administer to, you should not treat those people that you are administrating as being under you. If someone comes to you with some file to get passed, you should not boss around them. As an administrator, it is your duty to not boss around them, to treat them equally, because people always like to work with someone and not under someone. This is the another affecting factor. I hope this is clear, because working with someone always increases their self-respect, and this in turn increases the efficiency of the output or the target that you are achieving. So you should always work with someone. This is one way of depersonalizing order. So we are actually done with orders and conflicts. I hope you understood what we meant by conflicts in an organization and how to give orders. In the next session we'll learn about different things. So like and comment on the video and also subscribe to the channel if you do not want to miss the next video. Hope to see you soon in my part 2. Peace out.